what's up? And welcome to a brand new episode of FI Live. It's me, your favorite live stream host, Susan Choi, Digital Media Director of the Food Institute at www.foodinstitute.com, your number one news source for all things food and beverage industry media. We have great videos and articles and podcasts, focus reports, and live streams like these. If you go to www.foodinstitute.com, we offer subscriptions and memberships to access our premium content, which includes things like webinars. They are digital conferences which delve into key issues of food and beverage. You may ask, why am I talking about webinars? Well, because we do have one coming up right after this live stream. Today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, December 20th, we will be hosting a special panel of industry leaders that will share their insights on what the new year 2023 will have to offer, what's ahead in 2023. That is the title of the great webinar that's coming up right after this live stream. You don't want to miss it. Consumer demands, key points on inflation, high potential CPG trends. Those are just some of the topics that this webinar will cover. It's going to be very informative stuff. Don't miss it. You can go to www.foodinstitute.com right now to register. I know you can do it while you're watching this live stream. We are all multitaskers in this 21st century. Thank you, technology. But now let's go back to our live stream. Let's get onto the main event, Food Tech Trends at CES 2023. You know this show. I know this show, Consumer Electronics Show, happening in Las Vegas, Nevada in January of next year. It's right around the corner. And we've got a great guest with us today who helps produce this big event. And he has a lot of exciting and innovative new products and insights to share with us that will be at the show. So let's get it going. But first up, I want to introduce who is going to be my co-pilot today on FI Live. This is going to be his first FI Live appearance. He is our senior editor. He is an excellent journalist, and I'm so happy to have him on the show today. Thanks for joining us, FI senior editor Jordan Wickland.
Hello, Susan and the viewing public. My name is Jordan Wickland, senior editor at the Food Institute. It is cold in Minnesota where I'm located. It's warm in the basement though, and we hope you can stick with us for the entire webinar today. We're talking food industry tech, mobile tech, ag tech, all the tech. So please sit back, join us, shoot us some questions if you will, and we have a very special guest coming on.
That's right. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you also for reminding us that you can please comment, like, share, engage with us if you have questions. Please feel free to enter all of your thoughts and questions in the comments section right now, no matter where you are, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Right now, we will go on to our featured VIP special guest. He is the director of Thematic Programs for the Consumer Technology Association, which puts on the Consumer Electronics Show every year. And he is going to share with us, hopefully, all the juicy secrets behind CES 2023. His name is Brian Comiskey. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brian.
Thank you so much, Susan, Jordan, and everyone at the Food Institute. I'm really excited to be here today. So thank you all.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Let's get it going. So let's first off, why don't you summarize for us, what the Consumer Electronics Show is, what the overall mission of it is, and what the theme this year is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think even before we jump into CES, well, who is CTA, right? We're North America's largest technology trade association. I would say CTA is the tech sector. Our members are some of the largest multinational brands that you're familiar with in the tech space, as well as startups. So what it means is we support more than 18 million American jobs at our core. But of course, and why we're here today, you know us best as the owners and producers of CES, which is the most influential tech event in the world. It's really the proving ground, if anything, for groundbreaking technologies and innovations. And it's where those biggest companies all the way to those startups are able to meet together to showcase the latest innovation. And on their end, brands can do business, they can meet new partners where they all hit the stage. And we're going to be back from January 5th through 8th this year in Las Vegas. So we're really excited on that. But when we think about what is the central theme, what's really lovely about this year's show, and I'm an international relations major, and I studied human rights. So I'm really excited to see that human securities for all is going to be a unifying show focus for this year. How is tech really helping to solve these global challenges? And a part of that is we're in partnership with the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, who's a partner with the United Nations on these human securities for all platforms, which include addressing things like political security, environmental protection security, mobility security, that freedom of movement, and of course, and why are we here today, food security. So really, how is technology and innovation solving so many of these challenges?
Great. Well said, Brian. Thank you so much for summarizing that. I love what you just laid out for us, what the theme of CES is. As I remember in our previous conversations, I think a phrase used was tech for good. How are today's innovations, as you just described, how are they creating solutions for today's problems? And as we are the Food Institute and it's FI Live, obviously we want to get into food tech. I want to talk about, first of all, you just mentioned food security. Let's talk about innovations going on in this country, agricultural tech. Let's get into that. What are we seeing, if at all? Any sort of innovations, any sort of solutions happening that will help farmers out there in the country, because we know that because of many many causes, many situations that have happened. That we know have happened in the past 2 years that have affected our food supply, and it's also happening globally. What are you seeing with companies that are trying to come up with solutions in terms of farming?
Of course, and I'm glad we're starting with ag tech, because whenever I talk about food technology, I usually like to use the phrase agri-food tech. We should think of innovation really how we want to see our food, right? From farm to table. So starting right at the core of our farms is pretty critical. And I'm really excited because we're going to see a variety of different, and this is going to be a theme through every trend we talk about today, just convergence of other technologies to support and improve the other. So what comes to mind right away is we're really excited to have John Deere returning to the CES show floor. In fact, they're going to be the first ag tech company to ever keynote, with their CEO and chairman, John May, conducting his keynote on Thursday, January 5th at 8:30 a.m. But what we're excited to see in terms of their exhibit as well is they're going to be over in the new West Hall, the Las Vegas Convention Center, showcasing their CES 2023 Innovation Award winning autonomous tractor. And this rig, what's really nice about it is it can retrofit your current tractor. So it's a technology that can go on an existing model and allow it to be fully autonomous. And when you get into that space, what you're talking about is better precision agriculture, right? The idea of really getting down, and I want to say it's something to the inch of exactly how you're harvesting your crops, how you're going about managing your farms on a daily basis. And underpinning all of what John Deere is going to be focusing on is really this idea of sustainability and circular innovation. How are we having a more regenerative agricultural system? But John Deere isn't the only one. And really, agricultural innovations are going to be seen in the United States, but international focus is also huge. A third of CES's attendees are international. So we're going to see a couple other companies I'd love to highlight real quick as well. One being Agseed, AGXEED out of the Netherlands. They're going to be at the Netherlands Tech Square. And to be frank, the Dutch we'll talk about a lot today because they've put a huge focus on some of these innovations in circular and renewable technology, but they're makers of robot tractors that are fully automated. So rather than just an autonomous vehicle you're retrofitting, these are robots designed specifically for the ag tech sector. And then the other one, this is a little bit of that kind of domestic and international play with Siemens. So between Germany and the United States, right? We're going to see what's really fascinating is they have partnered with a company that developed a product called Nemo's Garden. This is an underwater farm. So these are farms that are fully done underneath the water. And why would you put a farm underwater? Well, what if your land is unable to support agriculture anymore because of climate change? Or what if you're facing conflict? So an Italian company started developing underwater agricultural growing technology. So Siemens has come in with their expertise in digital twin technology, a real-time, real-world application of the metaverse that's happening right now, to be able to take digital twins of these underwater underwater farms and be able to scale them at a global pace. So we're really excited at their exhibit over in North Hall. They're going to talk a lot about these solutions that they're bringing where metaverse meets sustainability meets ag tech. So it's just going to be a lovely display. Like everything I've talked about is all across our convention center. So really excited on that front.
Really exciting stuff. Just seems like the exhibitors are really working, working down to the bone to really embrace that theme that you guys have, coming up with solutions. But tell me, Brian, as a follow-up question, from your experience in seeing these kinds of products, in past CES shows that you've helped to produce, I mean, is this something that you see, the agricultural industry and the world at large? Is it possible, is it realistic to be able to implement these kinds of products and these kinds of solutions in a relatively, short amount of time, or realistically, in a normal kind of like reasonable time frame? Or is this something that, it's a great idea, but it may be far off? What are your personal kind of, what's your personal analysis on that, about what you're seeing so far?
Yeah, that's an important question to ask. And I think that's the question we ask with all innovation we see on the floor. Is it 5 years away? Is it a 10-year away question? I think at its core, I think when you look at these solutions, these aren't, we oftentimes see concepts or, vision innovations, and we're going to see a lot of those again this year that are really cool. What's really nice about AgSeed and John Deere's is these are technologies that exist that you can buy today. Now they're on the cutting edge. So in terms of adoption, these are very new. So they're, we're at a price standpoint that maybe is, we're going to watch certainly as the market is able to welcome in a bit more entrance into the autonomous space. But I think what's really underpinning it is, again, what are they solving? And so a lot of that comes into, we have the sustainability and that precision agriculture side. We need to look at environmental protection, security, that human security today, really. It's an important concept. So I think there's a premium in terms of getting into the space there that would accelerate a lot of timetables, especially for some larger farms. And then also, we are facing a work shortage. And this is something certainly that is going to permeate discussions, especially when we talk about robotics and AI. But there is farmhand shortage. And so you would see some of these applications for autonomy being able to plug some of these workforce shortage gaps. But it's beyond autonomous vehicles. John Deere actually won a CES Innovation Award last year for their See and Spray technology, which we're pretty sure is going to be back on the show for this year as well. And that's AI making sure you're exactly targeting your pesticide control. So healthier living at its core. I think in terms of what's that timeline look like, I think we'll really start to watch over the next decade a rapid adoption of some of these more, advanced technologies.
Wow. Thanks, Brian. As I often tell the staff, when you hear news like this, we live in the future, truly. You have to excuse and some unexpected guests come down the stairs. I think they'll be okay behind me. So there's all kinds of overlap at a show like CES, particularly within the food industry. Of course, we got, robotics flipping burgers. We've got AI-assisted data analysis. Someone like me that can go into the metaverse any night. I spent some time in the meta market last weekend, and I don't think anyone has an overall view of the whole Venn diagram of the industry, but there are certainly a lot overlapping. So Brian, what do you see at CES in terms of applicable AR and VR within the food sector that we might see in the next 12 to 18 months?
Certainly. And so I think the first one, I would pivot back to that previous example I gave around Siemens, their digital accelerator in North Hall. That is a real application of what digital twin technology can do for ag tech, right? Like today, how can we scale up sustainable farming solutions? Is especially and it's not surprised it came out of Italy, right? That initial underwater agriculture, considering there is a war actively occurring in Europe right now. So it's addressing problems of the moment. But when we think about this show, Metaverse is going to be back in a big way. This is going to be a major show theme for us. And I think consumers often jump right to thinking it's Ready Player One today, that we're going to be in this fully immersive digital world. That's a little bit off. But what we're going to see are these building blocks. What are the stepping stones that we have today to the universe? And digital twin is already there in this underwater agriculture example. It's if you're a Formula One fan, every time I look at the FI logo, I think F1. I'll be honest, it looks similar, but they use digital twin technology already at McLaren for some of their car development. But there's some other applications that I think we'll see in the food tech space from a few of our exhibitors. One that jumps right to mind is Lottie Data Communication Company out of Korea. They're going to be over in Central Hall. We have a devoted section for gaming and metaverse. And you're thinking, well, if they're in the gaming and metaverse section, what does that have to even do with food? They're creating a metaverse platform, and they'll be showcasing a couple of VR zones there. One around entertainment, but the other around shopping. And when you think about what shopping could mean in the enterprise space, is there's a home and lifestyle focus, but this could translate very well into grocery shopping. This pairs quite nicely with Microsoft, who we're really excited. They're going to be back on the show floor for the first time in over a decade, and they're going to have two spaces where they're exhibiting. They'll be in gaming and metaverse, so if you're a gamer and you want to see some of their partner applications, go to Central Hall. But if you want to see how the metaverse could impact e-commerce and food markets today, they're going to be doing at their booth in West Hall, so typically around the automotive side, they're partnering with a company called TouchCast, which specializes in the metaverse of things, or metaverse as a service. And they're going to showcase their TouchCast Cube, which is a digital twin of a store in the physical world. So basically think you walk into a room, you're surrounded by three walls, there's nothing there. The screen lights up and you are greeted by a wonderful, kind employee who's talking to you and walking you through a virtual store with actual shelves and talking product, while they're thousands of miles away in front of a camera recording it as you have this interactive store in front of you. Think about what that could mean from a grocery store perspective of being able to, rather than, okay, I have my regular Instacart or Whole Foods shipments happening here. Well, what if I can actually walk into the store, see what's available for my shopper who's going there, and then be able to pick out exactly what I'm looking for? These are those building blocks where you can start to see the uncovering of these applications. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, going even to a little bit more away from the Las Vegas Convention Center, over at the Venetian Expo Tech West, if you will. The Italian trade agency is actually going to have a company called Senior SRL, and they work on digitization of smell, actually. And this is going to be an underlying theme. We'll talk about digital scent in a bit. But what we'll see is they're using proprietary algorithms and AI to improve scent-based technology for developers around apps and platforms that can evaluate food freshness in real time. And they're looking at how they can apply that to VR landscapes, right? So if you have digital scent on VR, you can evaluate your warehouse or your own goods as a consumer with food freshness from miles away.
That's truly wild. I mean, I remember, 10 years ago when Amazon was first pranking us on April Fool's Day with drone delivery. It seemed so far away, and here we are. I mean, some major retailers just deployed drone delivery in Texas and Arizona. Do you see, are there drones flying around the CES show? And if so, and if not, what do you see coming in the next, the next year with that?
Certainly. Well, we do have some drones that will be on the showcase floor. I think Autel is going to be there exhibiting, as well as a few others in the drone space. And I'm just as excited to see what they're going to bring as you are. I know that they're going to be showcasing a lot of enterprise applications, certainly, and delivery feels like an area that they're going to showcase. Because I think the big thing here is there is a growing acceptance of automated delivery amongst consumers. In our own research, we've seen that for autonomous vehicles. And when you throw in autonomous vehicles, it's not just by road, it's not just by sea, it's also by air with some of our drone capabilities. and technology. So we've seen in our research over the years just a growing acceptance around some of these advanced air mobility solutions, and drone delivery is up there with them. The big one too, right, is we're gonna have to watch, and this is something that CTA prides itself on as a convener of private enterprise, as well as having a extensive standards body, is working with government regulation in terms of creating industry-led standards that promote innovation and competition in a way that actually will benefit consumers in the long run. So looking forward to seeing more of that on the show floor, and then it will be a big trend in 2023, certainly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we know the global drone delivery market is estimated to be about $30 billion by 2028. That from Fortune Business Reports, if you'd like to read more on that. One more follow-up question under this subject. What about NFTs? Where do non-fungible tokens fit in to the metaverse and AR and VR, if you will? That's
a really good question. And I think the NFT experience really goes back to crypto and blockchain. When you're talking about Web3 overall, metaverse is one application of Web3, the overall encompassing next evolution of what the internet will look like. An internet that's more interactive, more immersive, that has a lot more creator economics behind it too, where people are empowered. NFTs will certainly appear in our conference track. You'll see a lot of them over in C-Space, which is our Tech South location at the ARIA. Discussions around that front. But I think what will really underpin it all is NFTs are powered by blockchain, which at its core is extremely revolutionary technology that allows for it's going to be the underpinning of the commerce of the metaverse in a lot of ways, where this is how the economic system in the future should work. And I think we jump right to crypto and NFT, but we don't think of some applications that would be extremely helpful for, I would say, agri-food tech, which is more transparent supply chains. If you have a digitized ledger from blockchain where you can truly see, it's similar to art. If you're buying art and you want to know the provenance of the piece that you bought and who had it previously, well, we can start to do that with food supply chains. And one of the applications that I saw some companies are trying to develop is, my wife loves coffee and she gets it shipped from, I think she has like a monthly shipment from different countries. Well, what if through the blockchain, and this is real technology they're looking into, you can take a step back and say, okay, it came not just from this country, but it came from this farm in this country. This worker is the one who worked to harvest these beans. What if I wanted to use this to tip them directly, going right to the end of the supply chain and giving more in touch points between the consumer and the labor itself, which I think really just allows just an improvement in the supply chain, which is that's what I'm most excited about personally when I think about that blockchain technology. That's the thing where I go, this has so much utility. Great question.
Brian, going back into the metaverse technology, it's really interesting to me, when you're describing all the things that are going to be at CES that are using, applying that metaverse technology. But I want to hear your thoughts, Brian, as a professional, about your own personal analysis about, is 2023 going to be the year where, the consumer side is finally going to embrace the metaverse, so to speak? In the media, it's been covered based on what we've seen, since kind of Mark Zuckerberg's demo of Meta. It was expected to have a big splash. It didn't really. And then you had things like stock price falling, layoffs of employees, and just a general hesitancy on the side of the media to really embrace the metaverse. So what are your thoughts on, is next year, is it going to be the year where we will see, the fruits of the metaverse labor kind of finally being realized, especially since it seems like at CES, you have the tech industry just embracing that technology for what seems like such productive and fruitful uses.
Yeah, I think when we talk about, the reception to the metaverse, something that always comes to mind is the Gartner hype cycle with new technologies, right? You get all that initial excitement, all that build, and then there's always, with something new where people are trying to understand what it is, you do see that drop off in the excitement or the kind of a bit of a hesitancy to adopt. And I think that certainly has happened to a degree this year, but we were talking about this in previous conversations, Susan, I think around how B2B adoption oftentimes, or where the enterprise goes, then the consumer usually follows. And I think this showcase here at CES 2023 is really going to be, again, what I said, those building blocks, right? What are these applications we can use today that will help professionals across the board? And so we were talking about some of the underwater farming, the e-commerce applications, but one that really jumps to mind, and this is maybe where we start to get to our nexus point of where does enterprise meet the consumer. There's a company called OVR out of Vermont that's going to be showcasing at the Venetian Expo. OVR stands for olfactory virtual reality. So again, bringing back digital scent. So in a lot of ways, we talk about metaverse as people think of VR headsets, AR glasses. They think about immersing by sight and sound. Well, you don't get to the metaverse without also full sensory immersion. And so adding scent is critical because scent is so linked to memory, first off. And when you start to think about what that could translate into applications, there was a study out of the University of Otago in New Zealand with phobias, in particular around VR. They found that people, and I'll throw in a personal example. I'm extremely arachnophobic. I apparently on this phobia score out of 40, I score like a 39. I am the most scared of spiders you'll probably meet. People like me, though, in a 4 to 5 week trial of VR therapy, so this is a consumer direct application, got down to a mild form of phobia scoring in the 5 to 7 range on that 40-point scale, instead of in the high 30s. And so it's really about, and when you add scent into that with memory, you can get into these applications that have really tremendous applications for healthcare. So what would start with probably the practitioner side could move very well into the consumer side. The other conversation to have here too is gaming, right? We know gaming has, they build the world engines that will power the universe, or the metaverse, I should say. Epic with Fortnite has really been a leader. Roblox has been a leader. And I think the consumer adoption changes with how gaming has changed in recent years. It started off, let's be honest, if you logged online, you played games, you were competing with one another, right? You were having a lot of fun in competition. We saw in the pandemic, scores of people started gaming, not just to compete, for connection. So we really moved to social connection as a platform. And so this next step, when we go from competition to connection, is going to be collaboration. So really looking at the idea of how are we able to socialize but better work with one another. And I think that's what Meta is trying to do with their Horizons, and truly, I think the name change is really planting the flag to be the leader in the space. I think these sort of parallel tracks of seeing more enterprise applications where companies can do things today with it, and then gaming being more socially acceptable, more people are gaming across age groups than ever, that will create a desire to be more interactive in a virtual world, and those parallel tracks will eventually converge.
Right. Well said. Thank you, Brian. And we have a question here from a familiar face, Brian Choi. Question, Brian, where do you see the price of VR headsets going? What would be the price point? What would the price point need to be for there to be mass adoption?
Certainly. Well, the second one, I'll be honest, the second part of that question is that will all depend in some ways about where we're heading economically in the next few years in terms of inflation and other forces driving up price. But we do see the price of VR headsets going down. And that's something that we do a semi-annual industry forecast here at CTA. I sit in the market research department for context, folks. So this is where our trends come from. And my colleagues that I work with that oversee business intelligence and industry analysis really are excited. At CES, we're going to release the January edition of that semi-annual forecast. And in it, you'll see that VR headsets are starting to come down in price, which is, let's be honest, it's one of the major barriers to entry for metaverse technologies. In some ways, our headsets. So we're seeing it coming down, and I think we're getting closer to mass adoption. It's one of the more popular gift ideas that we've seen in the past few years too. We've seen the rise in the VR headset. But I will make another point about the metaverse and VR, which is it's not always about the headset. AR glasses will be an entry point. To be frank, your smartphone could be an entry point into the metaverse in a lot of ways, as well as my light turns off in the background. Metaverse, this is clearly an important point that this room wants to make. But it's, and also TVs. We did see last year, for example, back to your point, Jordan, at CES 2022, we saw NFTs displayed on Samsung TVs, really showcasing that they want to bring the TV even as an entry point. So we're talking about access in whole new ways at CES 2023, whether that's smell-o-vision like headsets to other areas. So that was a great question, Brian, and I thank you for adding it.
All right, that's always definitely something that our audience is always interested in, price points. I love the conversation we're having about metaverse technology. And I do want to bring up what we have talked about, what you have brought up to us in previous conversations, going back a little bit into robotics as well, going into some of the amazing companies that are going to be at CES, Aqua Robotics. Tell us about that. I really found that interesting.
Yeah, Aqua Robotics. So this is actually, it's a natural pivot point because metaverse ties into it, and I'll explain in a second. Aqua Robotics is a French company that's working to do water purification. So when we talk about food, there's the beverage side and then there's the water side, naturally. This is a robot that can go through water pathways of pipes without disrupting pipes. So when you think about when you're tracking for any disruption in your water supply, it could be rather difficult and also extensive to pull out the pipes and see what they're doing. Firsthand knowledge of this past weekend, there was a major pipe burst on my street and the fire hydrant was going off at full flow capacity for about 7 hours. So when you think about that, it took a 9-foot hole to get down there to identify what was wrong in the first place before they could fix it. And then you're losing water. In fact, to let's back up globally, we lose 32 billion cubic meters of water a year due to disrupted water supplies and technology breaks and breaks in the water supply. So this robot goes through, maps out where these disruptions are to proactively help try to fix it to prevent water loss. But further, it does digital twin technology to map out where these disruptions are. So here you're seeing metaverse meets robotics, meets food tech, meets sustainability. It's a lovely example of how really it's all about convergence in a lot of ways at this year's show.
It's fascinating. As you're saying, it's like their strategic use of metaverse technology, that digital twin technology, to come up with a solution to a real problem. It transitions perfectly into a question we have from another commenter, Santiago. I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced this correctly. Santiago Papaquilavastida, hopefully. How is the role of circular economy in food tech? Is there a relation? Do you see a connection there between circular economy and food tech? Does food tech have a role, Brian, in your opinion, in that model?
This is, and I say this a lot, but I think I've said this a lot today, but I really like this question a lot because I don't think of a better industry really for the circular economy than food tech. And a lot of that stems down to when we talk about from farm to table, and back, right? There's food waste is certainly a portion of this, as well as regenerative agriculture in a lot of ways. And I think the autonomous ag tech advances we talked about certainly get into a bit of how do you more sustainably make sure you're targeting the right parts of your land and then reseeding in the proper way and having very particular, precise pesticide management with something like John Deere See and Spray. But then there's the food waste example. And this is where we'll get back to, as mentioned before, we'll talk about Dutch innovation a little bit more. There's 3 exhibitors over at it's called the NL Tech Square. So Netherlands Tech Square. It's over in Eureka Park in Hall G of the Venetian Expo at CES. And these companies are 1/3 Orbisk and Waste Watchers. Waste Watchers is, I think around those, they're all dealing in different ways to address the problem of food waste. How do you get back to more sustainably bring things back to their source and their root? One is predicting shelf life of fresh produce, enabling real-time decision-making in the food supply chain and prevent food waste in the first place. That's from 1/3. It's a CES Innovation Award honoree, and it's a startup we're excited about. But then, well, okay, if you can't just do it in the supply chain, what about in kitchens? So Orbisk is going to be monitors and reduces food waste by employing AI technology to improve the sustainability and profitability too, because if you're eliminating food waste, you're improving your margins. And then Waste Watchers, similar, where food service companies are going to have an AI-based solution for forecasting and food waste monitoring. So really getting to the point of asking about, well, how do we get the whole life cycle built around in this place? And then the circular economy will raise, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bit, alternative proteins and sustainably trying to lower the footprint around cattle in particular.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, 100 billion pounds of food is wasted in the U.S. annually. That's not just on Thanksgiving for my kitchen upstairs. But what else do you see about alternative proteins and the development of, in order to alleviate some of that pressure? I mean, we know that mycelium and mushroom-driven foodstuffs are going to be a huge trend in the future. We've also heard about mung beans and volcanic sea moss. It's about a $40 million industry today. It's expected to triple to be close to about 127 in just 5 years. I mean, can you speak a bit to where we're moving in 3D printed food or alternative protein?
Yeah, and I think alternative proteins, we're going to see a wide variety of exhibitors on that front at CES. Right in Central Plaza, when you walk into Vegas, Armored Fresh is going to be there. They're a food tech company out of South Korea. They specialize in alternative dairy. So their big one is the zero dairy, focusing on plant-based cheese on the market today. So that's really the alternative dairy side. But when we get to alternative proteins, actually, they're both, the other two are also out of Korea. Korea is really going to have a major presence here for alternative proteins on the show floor. But Join, they're the makers of Mildom. It's a sustainable vegan food brand, and the technology behind it is really a work to make eco-friendly plant-based substitutes for egg white protein. So really focusing again on that plant side of replacing egg white. But you've mentioned, I think you said volcanic sea moss. I'm going to raise it up another level to KoreaSoft bringing a third generation edible insect smart farm machine and system. So for the first time, they're going to converge AI, robots, and IoT to showcase how we can get protein from additional sources like insects. To be honest, I'm extremely excited to go to that booth and whatnot. I think some people might go, well, insects, but it's a part of cuisine in a lot of other places in the world. And so I think that's one to see. That's the alternative protein side, but I think there's also a 3D printing element here to talk about. And so when you get into plant-based foods and how do you customize that, because there's a sustainability footprint, but we also have more and more people who have dietary restrictions, whether by choice or by health concern. I lived 3 years gluten-free as part of the health concerns. So there's a company called Savor Eat out of Israel. They're going to be over in the Venetian Expo in Halls A to D. They're developers of a platform that lets customers order plant-based food that's created to their exact specifications via a robotic chef that's using 3D printed technology to get the food. So again, right, it's 3D printing, robotics, AI, customer interfacing, and food tech, or the other ones. That's the beauty of it, especially AI and robotics. I should have said this at the top about it, but we should view AI and robotics really as both a horizontal technology. It's across everything now, improving the efficiency and optimization of just any performance. The other thing too is, and this is maybe for the enterprise a bit more than the consumer, they're digital utilities in a lot of ways for companies. So what does that even mean? We produce about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data as a society every day. If you want to know what that number means, by the way, quintillion means nothing until you say it's 2.5 followed by 18 zeros, which is astronomical. There's no way humans can process that amount of information on their own. So you effectively need AI and robotics to simulate human productivity and understanding to meet those gaps. And so when you look at that, companies need, historically have needed water, power to keep the lights on, to keep, the business running. Well, now AI robotics are like a utility for companies. You need to have it in order to effectively operate as an enterprise. And that's something we'll be talking about in one of my other panels at CES.
Yeah, I love what you've been mentioning. I mean, it's so true. It's, especially in robotics, it's already become an integrated part of the industry. We had a webinar, I think it was the other year, maybe the year before, a grocery store, I think in Colorado, and they had implemented this invention, like this machine. It was like a stocking machine. And they were having a good amount of success. They've been using it for about a year. I wish I remember the name of the company, the name of the grocery store, but it was a great webinar. And they were saying, what I really liked is they were really pointing out that even though we found FI that robotics can actually reduce labor expenses by 60%, I think, something like that. This grocery store was saying that it wasn't that the machine was taking away jobs, it was just improving things even for the labor force that was already there. It was doing things that was making it easier for employees to do. They couldn't reach certain, areas of shelves to restock, whether it was up high or down low. This robot could, AI could keep track of things, in a better way, but it wasn't taking away from the, the many needs that store had, that human labor was still important. So it leads me to kind of a follow-up, Brian, as as we were talking about things like the autonomous tractor, and we're also talking about things like high unemployment rates. Again, in your opinion as a professional, are you seeing that trend of robotics is like, it's a good supplement, but it's not necessarily taking away human labor? Or do you see a trend of soon we're going to have such efficient innovation, such efficient robotics that that this kind of like blue collar labor workforce is kind of going to disappear, like the human element of it?
I think the word that always jumps to mind when we're talking about robots, especially in this space, is cobots more than anything. If you're familiar with it, which is the robotic coworker. It's more about filling up workforce shortage gaps, not about displacement. So last year, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the quit rate amongst hospitality workers had reached 6.6% per month, which is more than double the national average. What's more is full service restaurants are usually operating with about 6.2 fewer employees than they were in 2019. So we haven't really fully recovered from the pandemic. I think we're permanently changed in the pandemic in a lot of ways. And so when we think about what the robotics market's going to do, it's going to help fill those gaps and focus on things like, I know like Suvi is a US maker of robots, has a countertop kitchen robot that they're going to showcase in one of the meeting rooms at the Venetian. It's about really trying to fill in those gaps more than anything. And when you're doing that too, I think the beauty of it is you're freeing up human labor to focus on the creative expression. What really are we passionate about, especially if we're at the restaurant, in a lot of ways, is the food and how it's cooked and the preparation. Humans being able to focus on that is pretty critical. And then the other thing, I'm just going to back up because I'm really glad you talked to Susan about robotics at grocery stores. And this is just something, a trend we've been watching. Automation of warehouses for grocery stores with robots is a major trend that we're tracking. Not just, I work in partnership with NASDAQ on thematic stock indices across a variety of technology themes. We look at food tech, but one of our big product areas is in AI and robotics for these indices. And Ocado is a big one where they've partnered with Kroger to bring automated solutions and robots to the grocery store footprint. Ocado started off as just an online e-commerce grocer over in the UK, and now they've moved fully into this automated logistics and grocery stocking robotics. So maybe it was Kroger that was talking about it, but this is a deal that's happened over the last few years and something we would expect to see a lot more of in the future.
Yeah, as if Kroger doesn't have enough press already. They continue to innovate and push the envelope for consumers all across the country, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So we have about 20 minutes left, maybe even 15, according to the second clock I'm looking at. So if anybody has any questions on anything we've covered, please use the chat. Don't be shy. From retail and grocery to mobile developments, AR, VR applications. As we said earlier in the webinar, it's all of a kind and it's all coming, and in many cases already here. So maybe now is a good time to kind of zoom down a little bit. Brian, what are you excited about? Not as a representative of CES, but as a global citizen and a consumer, just like the rest of us. I mean, what do you like to eat, and how do you anticipate it'll change?
Yeah. It's funny. When I first got so I've been with CTA for a little over 3 years, and people always ask me, like, because I went to CES 2020, it was my first one. And it was the first in-person show. And I think about, they're like, oh, what do you remember the most? I remember the exhibit I always talk about was I was at Media Day for Impossible Foods, where they debuted their Impossible Pork products, which was incredible because I'd never had anything Impossible. I even have a burger custom made. So I always get excited to know what food I'm going to eat, to be frank, at the show floor. So I'm looking forward to seeing what exactly it will be, but I know there's gonna be good ones. I'm gonna share that with you guys so and we can bring it back to these viewers later. And I think Brian is gonna be there, so I'll let him know. But when I think about this year's show, there's a stat that comes to my mind, and it's a little niche, but there's a condition called anosmia. It means no sense of smell. It's fitting that nose is in the word. This is probably surprising, is about 3% of people over the age of 40 in the United States are affected by like the lack of smell. So it's a condition that also got a lot of attention recently because of COVID. In fact, when I had COVID, I lost my sense of smell, and it's jarring. So that's why I've been talking about digital scent technology a lot on the show floor, whether that be VR as well as an AI company like Aromics doing AI-based creation of digital scent technologies. But this ties into the product I want to highlight, which is from Taste Boosters. They're going to be over in Eureka Park. It's a commercial eating utensil that has electronics built in to enhance flavor and neutralize aftertaste. So you're talking about some advanced circuitry that can help improve the tongue sensory for the brain to create a better eating experience, particularly like if you're working with eating something like healthy that might have less salt and sugar. It will help enhance the flavor a little bit. I know for myself, sometimes I do notice the difference on it. And so the idea is this is the first step to a commercial eating utensil that can bridge that gap. So I'm really excited about that because I want to know how I can make like some of these diet foods that I do try to be better about eating here and there would, really fit in on this regard.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. We have that up there, Spoon Tech. It's a great example of, it definitely seems to really embrace the theme that you mentioned that is going to be at CES. I want to know, Brian, in general, from your time in producing these shows that have, such a large audience and that have such a wide scope of exposure to the world. I mean, when you are, putting on these shows and you're, looking at, what, exhibitors, what types of exhibitors, want to be on the show floor. I mean, what are the key kind of factors that you all look for in who can exhibit, who can have a voice, on your CES platform? What are, in a macro sense, kind of what are the key issues, the key kind of, attributes that you look for in a potential exhibitor?
That's a really good question. I've never been asked that, I'll be honest. And a lot of that I think is because I sit in marketing research and I'm not in sales and membership, who they would be able to dive into the detailed answer. But taking that step back from that level kind of to trends, and this is where I sit in, is when we're building up the show floor, we think about the various sort of major technology trends that make up the space. And historically, we've had obviously display technology. CES has always had, beautiful TV displays, gaming monitors, but we've also had robotics. We're one of the largest auto shows, right? Food tech is a newer category in the grand scheme of things. I believe it was added officially in 2021. It's not that it hadn't been there before. Impossible Foods, as I mentioned, was at 2020. but we made it a dedicated show floor theme. This year, we have a new one with marine technology. So we're going to have Brunswick, Volvo, Penta, and Candela showcasing advancements in boat technology, including electric boats. So basically, what am I trying to say here is we're open to innovation across any technology category. And if anything that I've loved to have seen in my time here and my time before even as a contractor watching the show, is we've always just adapted and added in more context. So what are we looking for at its core? It doesn't matter if you're a startup or a large company or medium size. Are you innovating in the space around technology? We want you to be there, and we want to offer this as a platform for you to showcase that innovation. I think that's really what makes CES so special.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's a show a lot of people want to get to see what's coming on a large scale, right? Whether it is in the automotive world, which is my background originally, or food service. How about this though? I mean, most of us don't have access to that scale, or we don't work in it. We're just going about our lives trying to adopt technology that makes sense, that makes us feel good, that makes our food taste better, that gives us more accessibility to global flavors. Another question from Santiago: how can we make technological advances more accessible to small businesses, restaurants, the typical or atypical American family?
Well, I think when we talk about the show itself, we go to CES. A stat I always really like is 94% of annual sales are 94% of our exhibitors say their annual sales are impacted by the meetings that happen. Why do you meet in person in the first place at CES? And so a lot of these meetings, which is great, really gets to connect some of these companies to key investors that can help market out these technology advances to different areas. A third of our show attendees are international. So what you often see is CES as a bridging point to enter new markets. A good story, and this is not in the food tech space, but comes to mind immediately, is last year we had an exhibitor, VinFast, one of the first Vietnamese electric vehicle automotive makers. I see Jordan nodding his head because he's coming from the auto space. But
I covered them extensively.
Yeah. And so they're entering. So last year they unveiled new show floor models from, they're selling in San Francisco, I think, for the US. They started making shipments. I think they're making them in the next week or so, or if not in the past week, but that started at CES. And they're coming back this year to talk about how they're entering North American, European markets even more. And so I think from the show perspective, it's how are they making these connections? We even, and I'm going to make a plug for this from one of my coworkers. We have a match program where we do try to match some of these small startups with larger venture capitalist funders to get their technology out to more markets. It's a program that we're doing, and we're excited to see. I think the matches have started to go out, and they'll be meeting on the show floor. Beyond that, I think a lot of it is on our side in doing these chats here is how do we talk about these advances in a way that's discernible to the public as over at the Food Institute and over here at CTA? How do we bring these investments and make them an awareness element to them so that people know to look for them in the first place? Because really knowledge is power. And so I think that's the other half of the question I'd say, which is it's our job to make it more accessible to some of these places, is to raise the awareness on them and get them into these new markets, which would hopefully create a place where the prices maybe start to go down, making it better entry points for everyone across the board.
That makes a lot of sense what you're saying, Brian, especially because with my previous question that you answered, what you guys really look for priority is innovation. And then when you mention about, with this Vietnamese car company, they partnered with a venture capital firm. I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? That's the whole point of the show, is that you are seeking out, right, companies that have these great ideas, but maybe they don't have the funding yet. And by bringing them to a platform like CES that has a big voice that a lot of people hear, you can attract the eye of people who have that funding, and then you can make it a reality, thereby, changing, the way that we live, right? Coming up with solutions which aligns with that theme. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Brian Comiskey, Director of Thematic Programs for CTA, Consumer Technology Association. That puts on the one and only CES, Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas 2023. Brian, is there still time for people to register?
Certainly. There is some time to register at ces.tech. Get it in fast because the show is a few weeks away. But yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say is thank you all so much for having me. And if you ever need to reach out, I'm available and you can put me in touch. So, yeah.
Absolutely, we will be doing that. Actually, I do want to ask, what do you think the first thing you're going to do when you touch down in Vegas? What do you think the first thing you're going to is the first thing you're going to do?
The first thing I'm going to do, I'll be honest, I'm kind of crazy when I go on these long trips. I'm going to put everything in every drawer and be very organized and detailed about it. But after I do that, the first thing I like to do is before everything is set up, I just walk the floor. I just walk, even though I don't know exactly what every exhibit looks like. I like to just take in the space as I can. There's nothing like CES. And, you know, everyone said that to me before I started. But then I went to CES 2020 and they were right. And so that's the first thing I'm going to do. And I'm really excited because this year my wife will actually be at CES. So we'll hopefully do that walk for the first time ever with her too. So nice plug for my lovely wife.
I love it. That's combining romance with work. You know, you can't talk about a well-rounded life. That's what it's about. Brian Comiskey, once again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that's it for this edition of FLI. I'm Susan Choi, Digital Media Director. Jordan Wickland, my co-pilot. Thanks so much. You were great.